The past 3 seasons have been tough for the Toronto Raptors. It has been a gradual decline for the Raptors franchise ever since they broke through with a championship in 2019, and now they're stuck in a rebuild. For the 2024-25 season, it was clear that their intention was to compete for lottery balls instead of a playoff spot. To that end, they currently have the 5th worst record in the association, at 17-38, which has them right on track. However, the Raptors don't intend to stay down for long. Any Masai Ujiri-helmed franchise knows that remaining prepared in the event of a potential franchise-altering trade is necessary, as this strategy was vindicated back in 2018 when they struck a trade for Kawhi Leonard. Gathering assets is a must, as that is imperative to building towards a sustainable future of contention. Nonetheless, there are still plenty of questions to be asked regarding the big move the Raptors pulled off prior to the trade deadline. The main thing a team with contending aspirations needs is a franchise-altering talent that they can build the team around. The Raptors, at present, have deemed Scottie Barnes to be that player. Barnes, however, hasn't been quite as impactful in raising the floor of the team. As talented as he is, Toronto is still in search of the player that would take them from being a cellar-dwelling team in the East to being a consistent, contending team. And while it did come as a surprise that it was the Raptors, of all teams, that swung a trade for Brandon Ingram, this was nothing other than a characteristic move from a Masai Ujiri-led front office. Ujiri has a history of assembling assets and waiting to strike when the iron is hot, and Ingram, at the very least, would put them one step closer to acquiring the next foundational superstar that is made available on the trade market. Of course, the criticisms regarding the Raptors' trade for Ingram are understandable. Ingram is an iffy fit alongside Barnes and RJ Barrett, as the three require a lot of the basketball to do much of their damage. To top it all off, the Raptors gave Ingram a 3-year, $120 million contract extension, a hefty investment in someone who isn't exactly the piece that would take them over the top. The Raptors are playing the long game, even though on the surface, it did not look as though they made a shrewd move by acquiring Ingram. But for the low price they acquired Ingram for, this move could end up being very worth it. They only had to give up Bruce Brown, an expiring contract, Kelly Olynyk, a better fit on a contending team, a 2026 first-round pick from the Indiana Pacers, which should end up outside of the lottery anyway, and a 2031 second-rounder, not a bad price to pay for someone who's a fringe all-star. But for salary matching purposes, and for the protection of their investment, this was a move that the Raptors had to make. Say for example, someone like Devin Booker becomes available. Ingram stands out as an easy piece for the Raptors to build a prospective trade package around. There are always going to be health concerns surrounding Ingram, but this was a risk the Raptors had to make, considering where they are in the roster building process. Some might frame this move as a mistake, but Ujiri definitely deserves the benefit of the doubt for being an aggressive team at the trade deadline instead of being just a run-of-the-mill seller like many expected them to be. The Sacramento Kings had one of the most consequential trade deadlines in recent franchise history. This chaotic period was foreshadowed by a season that to this point has not gone according to plan. And now, star point guard De'Aaron Fox is no longer on the roster after being traded to the San Antonio Spurs. It's a shame this happened. A former number 5 pick in the 2017 NBA draft out of the University of Kentucky, Fox went through 5 years of disappointment with the team that drafted him. The Kings had the longest playoff drought in the NBA at 16 heading into the 2022-2023 season, but that year, under new head coach Mike Brown, Sacramento went from Western Conference bottom dweller to the best story of the NBA season. De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis formed one of the best offensive duos in the NBA, and the light the beam movement was formed. De'Aaron was there for the difficult times and helped this franchise emerge from a massive hole and become a number 3 seed in the conference. 1.5 years later, Mike Brown has been fired and Fox has been dealt from the franchise that drafted him. However, the problem is not that Sacramento has decided to trade its 27-year-old star point guard. It's what the team got in return, which has been this franchise's most significant mistake this trade deadline. While it seems like the Kings got a decent haul for Fox, a closer look points out the fundamental flaws of this deal. The return involved Sidi Sissoko, Zach LaVine, Charlotte's 2025 first-round pick, Chicago's 2025 second-round pick, San Antonio's 2027 first-round pick, Denver's 2028 second-round pick via San Antonio, 2028 second-round pick, its own via Chicago, and Minnesota's 2031 first-round pick via San Antonio. Looking at the first-round picks, the Charlotte one is lottery protected. If the Hornets do not make the playoffs, which they won't, this will result in 2 second-round picks. The San Antonio pick is unprotected. However, the Spurs now have Fox and Victor Wembanyama on their roster, so that selection will likely be in the 20s. The Minnesota selection might have promise, but that likely depends on whether Anthony Edwards remains with his franchise until then. At just 23 years old, Ant will be in his prime that year, which diminishes this selection's potential trade value. With the way the Bulls have been playing recently, that first second-round pick should be high. The other two remain to be seen. Overall, for a star point guard who helped turn around the franchise, the draft capital the Kings received back would not be bad if they received a valuable asset in return on the court. The first player, Sidi Kosoko, is a 20-year-old late second-round pick from 2023. The guard forward is considered a project. Zach LaVine's addition to the deal is confusing. The Bulls' shooting guard, to the point he was dealt, was having a stellar season in Chicago. The two-time All-Star, however, was seen as being an undesirable asset until this year. While LaVine's contract of about $95 million over the next 2 years is somewhat manageable, it does marginally limit Sacramento's roster flexibility that it would have had on Fox's contract until 2026. LaVine's addition also fits into the issue the Kings had coming into this season. Sacramento's move to trade Fox makes the sign and trade for DeMar DeRozan look extra confusing. The Kings made the bold move to deal for the 6-time All-Star in a gamble that has not paid off. While DeRozan has been efficient offensively, he and Fox have slightly redundant skill sets when it comes to scoring. Neither are considered elite three-point shooters, and consequently, Sacramento's efficiency from beyond the arc got worse this season. The 2024-25 season that started so full of hope for the Atlanta Hawks is once again turning into a lost campaign marred by injury woes. The Hawks currently have a 26-29 record, which still has them in the thick of the playoff hunt in the mediocre Eastern Conference. But the season-ending injury to Jalen Johnson has made things more difficult for Trae Young and company. Prior to the trade deadline, the Hawks had to balance being able to sell off some of their most valuable players as well as trying to remain competitive. After all, their 2025 first-round pick belongs to the San Antonio Spurs, courtesy of the costly DeJounte Murray trade, which means that they are stuck with having to try and compete for a playoff spot. To that end, the Hawks did quite well with their trade deadline maneuverings, although one move stands out as something that raises some eyebrows.